let us see what ASME has to say about inch dimensions and metric dimensions. First of all, ASME says that we are allowed to use either one, and in fact, these two pages are out of the ASME standard. So one is equally as good as the other. It just depends on what your company chooses to do and maybe who the ultimate user of your drawing will be. What you'll notice as you start to look at these examples from ASME is that in this set of examples that are metric dimensions, so these are millimeters, notice this 0.9 thing here. If a dimension is less than 1, less than a whole number, in metric dimensions, you're supposed to put a leading 0. However, notice that, none of these dimensions have trailing zeros. None of them have zeros after the significant numbers. And if it's just a whole number millimeters, it's just like 12, is just 12, no zeros. So those things are different than the examples we see over here in the inch dimensions. Notice that all of these dimensions, which are less than 1, have a decimal and some numbers, but no leading 0, no 0 out in front. And notice that we do have some trailing zeros. So here is, this is 3/4 of an inch, so 0.750. There's a 0 there. We don't need the 0, but in inch dimensions we put them in. Here is a comparison of metric and inch dimensions. If you're dimensioning in metric, you do have a leading 0. So here are two numbers, 0.1 and 0.25. They do have leading zeros. In inch dimensions, we do not have leading zeros, so 0.100. And we pronounce this 100 thousandths, and this 0.250, we pronounce that 250 thousandths. That comes from the idea of often working with machinists who are used to thinking of numbers in 3 decimal places, so thousandths of an inch. So we just get in the habit of saying, this is 250 thousandths. I'm in the habit of saying 1/4 of an inch, as you probably noticed. So metric dimensions do have a trailing 0. Inch dimensions do not have, metric dimensions do have a leading 0. Inch dimensions do not have a leading 0. Now about the trailing 0, notice that in the inch dimensions we do have zeros trailing after the number, whereas in metric dimensions we do not have any trailing zeros. We just stop with a number that is non-zero. Now, there's a line in ASME which says dimensional limits are absolute, and a translation. What that means is that the number of zeros in your dimension doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about how precise, how close a tolerance that particular thing has. So according to ASME, 5.0 is exactly the same as 5.00000. How do we know how precise a dimension is supposed to be? We look in the title block where it says, unless otherwise specified, tolerances are plus or minus something or other. We'll talk about that more in a couple of weeks when we look at tolerances. Here is a part dimensioned with millimeters on the left and with inch dimensions on the right. So notice in the metric dimension, oh brother, I should have proofread this before I stole it from a different book. So he forgot his leading zero. Well, dadgummit. Well, anyway, let's look at our inch dimensions, because that's what we're really focused on in most of the drawings that we do in this class. Notice there are no leading zeros. There are trailing zeros, and you will just decide in your drawing how many decimal places you want to put in your dimensions, and then they'll all be the same. In this drawing, all the dimensions have 3 decimal places, which is pretty common in American manufacturing companies. Let's go look at our drawing a little bit. So here's a drawing. First of all, looking at the title block, I'll just remind us that these words here in the title block say, unless otherwise specified, dimensions are in inches. And we say that because ASME lets us do either metric or inch, so we're telling the reader which system we're using. And then right below that it says, and here's the tolerance that applies to every dimension in my drawing, unless I say otherwise. So there's that. Let's go to model space. And here's the part you're going to be drawing for today. Now, what happens if you open some drawing, maybe you start a new drawing from scratch, or maybe you use somebody else's drawing, and you put a dimension on here. Oh no, it has a leading zero. That is bad. Let's go see what to do about that. Let me put one more dimension on this collar thickness up here. While I'm here, I just want to point out that if you're dimensioning this thickness, you do not want to do this. So here's what not to do. Don't click over here somewhere and then, whoops, let me get that dimension going again. Don't click over here somewhere and then drag the dimension out, because you don't want these lines, these extension lines, running over your corner with no gap in there. See the little gap here? You want a gap. So the way to dimension a feature is to figure out which corner is the farthest out corner. And for this collar here, on the inside of the collar, the farthest point is that corner right there. So I will click there. Then for the height, I'm going to go all the way out to this corner and click there. So there are my 2 points. Now, when I drag out my dimension, we have those nice gaps that AutoCAD automatically puts in. But our dimensions are bad because they have leading zeros. How do we fix that? Let's go look. We're going to go to the dimension style, and so we'll go to the Annotate tab, and here's where we can set styles for various things. I'll go to the Dimensions panel here, and I'll click the down arrow, and I will modify my style. Now, in the dimension style, we have all kinds of tabs across the top, and let's just hack around and see if we can figure out where to turn off the leading zero. It's probably not in lines or arrows. Maybe it's in text. Let's click there. Nope, no zero there. Maybe it's in fit. Nope, nothing there. Maybe it's in aha, primary units. Yes. Look at this thing down here. The wording is a little bit more flowery than it needs to be, in my opinion. But it does say zero suppression. And watch this preview window when I click this box that says leading. So when I click this, it suppresses leading zeros. Click. And notice how the leading zeros went away. And now that I have clicked leading zero suppression, let's go back out to our drawing and have a look. Oh look, the leading zeros went away and I'm left with a good-looking dimension. How did I get those 3 decimal places, by the way? Let's go back and look at that one more time while we're here. So in primary units, at the top you can click what kind of units you want. Do you want architectural that will have feet and inches? Do you want decimal? Yes, I want decimal. And then the next line down says precision. If you just click one of these other things, like, how about I'll click that one, only 1 decimal place. Now we'll go out to our drawing. Look, now I only have 1 decimal place. I don't want that. I'm going to go back to my dimension style, to my primary units tab, and go back to something that has 3 decimal places, 3 digits after the decimal point. And my zero suppression is still checked, so that's good. Now we'll go back to our drawing. Yes, everything is looking good now.